Right. All right. I think that we will get started. Um, Welcome to everybody. My name is Kristen Hoffman. I'm the director of the Autism Center at Misericordia, and I'm really excited to be here tonight, partnering with the Hazelton. Why can I never remember the name? Sandy, I'm sorry.
Very long.
I just had it on the tip of my tongue and then it was gone. Can you remind me again?
The Hazelton Autism Family Support Hub.
Thank you. Thank you. As we are trying to bring you some webinars that are relevant to our time, of course, now as we are in this back to school season in this new sort of school, as everyone is beginning either a completely virtual or hybrid model, we thought that talking about creating an effective learning space in any home was a really important topic. So we have three panelists with us today. We're going to be starting with Sandra Kirchner, and I'm going to let you get started.
Okay. I'm going to share my screen. Okay, hopefully everyone can see that.
Yep.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Thanks you for joining us. I'm just going to start with a little bit about me. So I completed my doctorate at Miami University in Ohio and moved to northeastern Pennsylvania in May 2004 to finish my pre-doctoral internship at Geisinger in the pediatric psychology department in Danville. I then started working for Children's Service Center as a behavior specialist. So I am a licensed behavior specialist consultant, and I've been there since August 2005. And about 95% of my clients have lived in the Hazelton School District and are diagnosed with autism. Since April of last year, I have been the senior service navigator for the Hazelton Autism Family Support Hub through the ACE Collaborative. And that is how I met Kristen, and we started putting together these programs because we saw a real need for support, not just for families and children, but for the educators that are so important in the children's lives. So the presentation we're giving tonight will be about the ways that you can incorporate things to have an effective learning environment in your home. The presenters who are going to be going after me are really going to talk more about the nuts and bolts of some practical ideas. What I'm going to focus on, though, is a little more of the broad sweeps and some things that I've just been seeing both personally and in my professional practice that a lot of people are struggling with. So the first most important thing is let go of expectations. There is a place to have appropriate expectations, but we are living in a time where things are so up in the air, things are so unusual, things are so that you will do better for your child if you don't put so much pressure on yourself to be perfect. You're not going to be perfect. Some ideas, behind that, there are just some truths about learning and education during COVID-19 that I think we all need to think about and really take to heart. The most important one is this is never going to be the same as school. There is just no way for it to be. So the most important thing, and I'm seeing a lot of posts, and those of you watching this may have seen, the posts on the internet or on Facebook or social media, really focusing on how to set up your home environment so that it mimics school, so that it mimics the school environment. You're not going to. It's not going to happen. Set up your learning environment in the way that makes the most sense for your child in your family. If that means the child is sitting on a yoga ball, if that means they're on the floor on their belly, if that means whatever it means for your child, don't feel like just because it doesn't look exactly like a school classroom that it's not going to be effective or they're not going to learn. The second one is be willing to experiment. Patience and flexibility are going to be your greatest assets over the next couple of months. When I say be willing to experiment, understand that you may have to try 5 or 10 different things before you find the one that works, before you find the thing that really provides for your child the best way to do something. A little example that one of my clients gave me, which I thought was great, was having the teacher on the computer screen or on a tablet screen was very hard for her child to focus on. But when she cast the computer to the television, then she was able to capture his attention because it was a widescreen TV where he was used to, he had a reinforcement history of good things happen on the television. And so that's kind of the idea behind it. Don't be afraid to do things and try things that don't look like school or don't look exactly how you have in your head that distance learning should look. At the same time, as I'm saying, be willing to experiment, it is also true that you shouldn't give up if something doesn't work the first time. A lot of times children, and this is both children on the spectrum and neurotypical children, need things to be presented to them multiple times before they become comfortable with it, before they can really take it in and get over the fact that it is a novel or new thing. And so they're not really paying attention to the content maybe because the whole experience is novel. So if your child isn't paying attention the first time or the second time, that's okay. Give it a couple of tries, because once the novelty and the newness wears off, that may help them focus on the content of what you're trying to do. And the last most important part is you're not in this alone. You have a support system, whether that is the teachers in your school, the OT, the PT, the speech therapist, the support teachers. If you have a behavioral support agency, if you have family members, don't be afraid to ask for help. Don't be afraid to ask for ideas, even on the internet, parent support groups or the hubs that Kristen and I run. We're going to be providing the information for the contact information for the hubs later. And we are always, able to help answer questions. And if you need more help or more support, help connect you to that support. So that is really important. The next idea that I really want to focus on is also, I'm hearing a lot, and as a parent myself, there's a lot of fear behind what's happening right now. And that if we don't do the exact right thing every day during this distance learning, that our children are going to fail, or that we will not be able to recoup the losses that they have. That is not true. Your child's education is a marathon. It's not a sprint. And while I certainly would not say that there will not be impacts of the lost time or the lost experiences that they're having now going through this distance learning, try to approach it from a perspective of not this is not going to work, but what do we all need to do to make this work? And I really think that letting go of fear is the most important part of that. So a big part of being able to let go of fear is setting your child up for success. There are a couple very broad things that you can do that will go along with what the rest of the presenters are going to be talking about that I think are going to be really important. The first one is build positive associations with whatever location you are doing the learning in. That includes doing enjoyable activities in your learning space. So if your child really likes to color, or they really like playing with Play-Doh, or whatever, incorporate those activities into the learning space. Because one thing that can happen, if every time the child goes to the learning space, they're being asked to do work or things that are difficult for them, things that are frustrating for them, then that location itself will build very negative associations for your child. And that will be harder for you to overcome. You want the learning place to be something that the child looks forward to going to because good things or fun things happen there. The second is predictability leads to stability. So we are all living in a time, and especially your child is living in a time when they don't know what to expect. This is something that the vast majority of us have never done before. And if we as parents, or we as educators, we as professionals are struggling with that, then the children are definitely struggling. So using a picture schedule or written schedule or writing a social story to help show your child what to expect could be a really important thing for them, because then they're not facing a great unknown that every day they go to their, you're asking them to go to this learning space that you've set up. It's something they've never done before, but you've set it up so that they know what to expect. Another one is it's okay to start small. We're all very stressed out about, how much time the children are going to be in front of a screen, how much time they're going to be able to tolerate sitting in a session. Talk to your teacher, talk to your support professionals. You may need to start with 5 or 10-minute sessions. You may need to start with very, very short amounts of work and then just doing fun things with the teacher. You want to make sure that you haven't over frustrated the child, because again, that then leads to a negative association with the whole experience. So it's okay, and you may need to start with very short sessions. The last thing I'm going to talk about, because there's been a lot of talk about, how do we motivate the kids for distance learning? How do we make them interested in what's happening on the computer? The biggest thing that I would recommend is having the reward or the motivation, the positive thing happen during the session. That the motivation or the reward, the reinforcement shouldn't be going somewhere else and doing something else. So you just need to get through this, and then you can go out and play, or then you can watch your favorite show or whatever. Because what ends up happening when you do it that way is that the child then becomes so focused on the activity being over that they're not actually focusing on what you're trying to teach, what the content is. So building in those rewards you know, maybe a reward is the teacher plays a little clip of their favorite song or whatever, but have it happen during the session, not for leaving the session. So those are the really big kind of broad ideas behind what I think is going to set us all up for success. Before we move on to the next presenters, I did want to provide, so this is the contact information for the hub that I run in Hazleton. It is the Hazleton Autism Family Support Hub, our email address and our website. You can also call us. We do have a service navigator. It might not be me, but we do have a service navigator that is manning the phones. If she's not available when you call, she'll get back to you within 24 hours. We try and get back very quickly. We also have a Facebook page at Hazleton Autism Hub, and you can also, we are accepting walk-ins at our office in Hazleton. We do ask that you, you know, follow CDC guidelines. We do screenings. We do ask that people wear masks, though we understand that sometimes the children have a hard time, but definitely, if you have any questions, need any additional help, reach out to us at the hub.
That's great.
Give that back to you.
Great. Real quick, I actually meant to say this in the beginning, so I apologize. If you have any questions, I do see some people raising their hands. If you have any questions, you can type those questions into the chat box. If you go to the bottom of your screen, you should see an option to chat there. We are going to get through our 3 presenters first, and then the second half of our presentation is going to be that question and answer session. So please feel free to type in any of those questions. I'll be keeping track of them, and when all the presentations are done, I will make sure that all the panelists get to those questions that you might have. Okay, so next we're going to be hearing from Sam, and take it away.
All right, thank you. So let me share my screen. Okay, so my name is Sam. I am an elementary teacher. I have experience in the 2nd grade level, 5th grade level. I've also been a TSS worker, a behavior technician, both for children with autism. Currently, and in the past, I have been doing online teaching. I teach ESL online to children in China. So that's kind of where all of my online virtual learning, distance learning experience comes into play. And I've learned a lot from that experience over the last 3 years. So hopefully I can give you some tips that will make the distance learning a little bit easier in your home. I'll be sharing about, you know, kind of setting up the learning environment, giving you some different options that might work for your particular space, because I know that can look different for every family. So hopefully I can give you some quick and easy tips to kind of get your student or your child started with their distance learning. So first, we'll just talk about designating that space for their learning. And this can look different in every home. So for instance, if you see this picture I posted here, I love this idea of using a trifold board. It will limit distractions, especially if you have to set up the learning area in maybe a busy part of your home, which could be a kitchen or a living room area. Maybe they're sitting at a coffee table. If you don't have that separate space, which not everyone does, to make sure it's in their bedroom or a separate office, if they're in a busier part of the home, this can really help cut down on distractions. It will also help them with their organizational skills. They can have all of their materials kind of attached to that board like you see here. They can have their pencils and their calendar to keep track of assignments. So it's really a great way to organize, and also it's portable. So you're able to move it from one space to the next if you can't designate one certain area for your child's learning each day, and that's fine too. Flexibility is going to be key. Sometimes they're not going to be able to use the same space for whatever reason. So this is just a great option if you need it to be portable and you need to move their space occasionally. So this is a really great option. And these trifold boards you can get at the Dollar Tree for $1, which is another great benefit for that too. Also, if you're thinking about materials and how you're going to store materials for your student or your child, stackable bins. You can also get a lot of those plastic bins at the dollar store. I know for my classroom, in the past, I've gone to the dollar store for a lot of my materials. So you don't have to spend a lot of money. Something with drawers or even just some empty plastic bins to keep their things in, pencil pouches. Making sure it's within arm's reach is great so that they're not having to leave the learning area often. However, if your child does need that movement throughout the day or throughout each session that they're in, maybe put them a little further away, and then they have that opportunity to get up and walk and come back into their learning space with their materials. So it's very flexible, doing what's best for your child. We're also going to talk about some technology and equipment. Maybe your teachers have suggested some of these things to you. There are some alternatives that you can think about if you don't have access to all of these or some of these things, but they're just some quick tips that I've learned over the years with distance learning. One being an easy way is to prop up your laptop or your tablet that you're working on so that it's at eye level. This really makes it easier. It puts less strain on their neck and their back, so they're not looking down and they're not looking up, but you're looking straight into the camera. So it makes it a lot less stressful on their bodies, and it makes it easier to see their teacher and for their teacher to see them. Also, a headset is beneficial because it helps them to hear the teacher more clearly, and it helps the teacher to hear them more clearly. However, some children may not be receptive to wearing headphones, and that's okay too. Maybe finding a quiet corner in the room somewhere where they can put their volume down a little bit if there's other things going on in the home, but they could listen without headphones. That's also another option. One really important detail that I've noticed with some of my students when we've been in a Zoom meeting or in classes is all of a sudden we'll be in a lesson and my student disappears. And they'll come back a few minutes later and I'll say, "Where did you go?" And they'll say, "I'm sorry, my computer died or my laptop died and I had to plug it in, I had to charge it." So just making sure you're making it part of your routine every night. Plug it into the charger, making sure your technology is fully charged and ready to go the next day, but also keeping those chargers nearby during the day, just in case. Another important aspect that I've learned about is lighting. Lighting can be very important for the teacher to be able to see their students, to see things that they're working on if they are in a live session. Also for the teacher to have good lighting so that the students can clearly see what the teacher's presenting. So I always say that natural light is the best light, but that's not always practical. So some alternatives that you can use are, and that I use in my classroom now, are ring lights. They become very popular right now, especially on Amazon. So ring lights come in different sizes. They have clip-ons that you can clip right onto your laptop. They also have larger ones that come on like a tripod that you can set up on your desk area. So that provides a lot of light from the front. So just one tip is to try to put your light directly behind your laptop or behind your tablet that you're using, so it's facing you directly. I actually have two lights set up because I don't have enough space on my desk, so they're kind of both off to the side, coming from both sides. So if you can kind of even it out that way to create as much lighting as possible, it just makes it easier for everyone to see you. You really want to think about planning for child-specific needs. This is so important when it comes to distance learning, is that it's not going to look the same for everyone. And I know that Sandy had touched on that quite a bit, that you don't want to have too high of expectations about what needs to be done. You just need to do what is best for your family and for your child. That's really the most important aspect that you should look at. So some ways that you can plan for your child is to incorporate their interests in their learning space. So this will promote motivation, engagement. Let them decorate their space a little bit. And this can be anything from some stickers or a few posters that they want to put up, maybe with some inspirational sayings or characters on them that they enjoy, but something to make it personal to them. You want to also create that positive association with coming to the learning space. So this is one way to kind of engage them by using their specific interests. Also using positive reinforcement. So this can look like reward systems, incentives for participation in class. So make sure you're using this during, like Sandy said, during class time, during learning time. You are praising them, giving positive reinforcement for raising their hand and participating in class, paying attention to the teacher, completing their work. And this can look different for all children based on their interests. It's very difficult for children to sit for long periods of time for distance learning. So you definitely want to try and incorporate movement breaks throughout the day or sensory breaks, because this can be overwhelming for children and students. This is something very new. So they might need a lot of breaks in the beginning, and that's okay. So being able to incorporate those movement breaks and sensory breaks for them to make sure they're not getting overstimulated in the environment. You want to keep a positive association with the environment. So take the time to allow for those breaks. And also some flexible seating options I have here. My students loved this in the classroom. So it's great because you can use that at home as well. So like Sandy said, if they want to sit on a yoga ball in class, that's great. They could do some floor seating or lay on their bellies. They can use lap desks. They can stand for class. Allow them to make those choices specific to them and what their needs are. Also, using those visual schedules and checklists are going to help your child move throughout the day and transition more smoothly through one activity to the next. So picture schedules, checklists, task lists. So let them put a sticker next to each activity as they complete it. So they know that they're not stagnant, but they're moving through the day. They are getting things done. And also you can set a timer to show them that, you know, we work for this amount of time and then we get to do something else and we get to move on to this activity. So setting a timer, a visual timer is great, but these picture schedules and checklists provide that consistency and routine to kind of help lower their anxiety in this new environment. And one last thing I suggest for families, especially if you have multiple children in the home who are participating in distance or virtual learning, is to keep a calendar just as an organizational tool to remember assignment due dates, parent-teacher conferences. So this could be like a dry erase board that you can change from month to month. And if you have multiple children in the home that have all of these different schedules and all of these different assignments, you can just assign a different color to each child, and that will be visually easier to see and keep track of all of the different things that you are trying to keep track of. So these are just a few of my practical tips for distance learning.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that, Sam. And finally, we are going to have Kelly, who is an occupational therapist, speak to us a bit from her perspective. You're on mute, Kelly.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, awesome. Hi, everybody. I don't have an initial slide to introduce myself, so let me take some time to just introduce myself really fast. I graduated from Misericordia with my master's in OT 2 years ago. And I've been working in pediatrics ever since. It's my passion. I love it. And let's just say that this whole situation threw really a huge curveball in my direction. I did do telehealth for, I don't know, maybe like 15, 16 weeks. So parents and teachers, I'm right there with you. I understand how stressful this time has been. So I'm going to use my time to hopefully provide as many practical ideas for you guys to implement in your classroom, whether you're doing hybrid learning or your home environment. So here we go. So I know that these have been discussed already, so I'm just going to briefly touch on them. Tools to Grow is a huge resource that I use for parents when it comes to visual schedules. They have a lot of really, really good ones on there. And also the website Teachers Pay Teachers, they have a lot of free resources sometimes that have really bright and colorful visual schedules. You want them to be motivating, not only for the child to look at, but to want to keep track of what they're doing. These work super well. And another thing, there's a free app on the iPhone, and you can get it on your tablet too. It's called Visual Countdown Timer. I found that to be a really good resource for a lot of my families. It's bright, they get to pick the character that comes up at the end, and you get to designate when it goes off. So that's been super helpful. And also Amazon Alexa does have a timer option as well. So that's super easy, especially for your older kids who are a little bit more independent in their learning. If you have them on the screen and you know you want them working for 10 minutes, they can easily, you know, yell to Alexa to set the timer, and then that when it goes off, it's kind of motivating for them. It's that reinforcer. So again, this was also kind of discussed, but just some things to think about that I've noticed doing a lot of virtual telehealth sessions is there's a lot of visual things that you don't necessarily consider that can be super overstimulating for a lot of our kiddos. Whether they have a diagnosis or they're neurotypical, it doesn't matter. Those distractions are still present. So making sure that we kind of try and tackle them as best as we can and just raise our awareness of what those look like. So whether we have siblings or parents working from home in the environment as well, where our table or desk is located, you know, if we're by the window, we want to see what's going on outside. And, you know, if there are other kids working, it's not such a bad idea to kind of maybe even catty corner your student or your child kind of so they have their own designated space. So they're kind of looking at whether they have those posters or motivating things on the wall, or they need a blank space because it's anything else is too visually stimulating for them. That's always an option too, especially if space is limited. Screens and TV, obviously screens are necessary at this time, but that external screen, like whether the TV's on or somebody's listening to music or watching Netflix, that can also be super distracting for a lot of our kids. So trying to keep that at bay as much as possible. And then from an auditory standpoint, I mean, I had a lot of kids whose learning environment had to be near the window, and the landscapers would come every day at 12, and that's when we had our session. So considering what kind of auditory stimulus is in the environment, like Samantha said, you know, if headphones are a feasible concept for your child and they can tolerate it, great. But if not, could they relocate for that hour where they're needed to be on the screen, or is there another time that works better for them? So taking all of those things into consideration if they're in your control. So I just want to talk a little bit about sensory systems fast, just because I'm an OT and I can't help myself. But looking at your child's everyday life, they are getting so much from their environment, and you kind of have to think of how their day and their schedule and routine has transformed completely. At school, they're getting recess, they're getting social opportunities with peers, they're playing on the playground, they're walking to and from class, they're not just sitting all day. And sometimes, I mean, as this transition's been happening, the workload may not have decreased, but it's a different style of learning. So they might be sitting at the computer to get all that work done for hours at a time, and that's just not feasible, and our bodies need a lot more movement. So the vestibular system is how our bodies process movement in space. It's actually the fluid within your semicircular canals in your ears. So that high intensity vestibular input, which is going to alert our kids and raise their attention, is going to be anything where they can be upside down, if they can spin around. So I have a lot of kids that I do, if they have a yoga ball, we'll go upside down on the yoga ball, or we'll even hang off the couch a little bit if parents are around and it's safe, just so they can get that increase in their arousal level, so that attention increases, and I get so much more receptive and reciprocal engagement when I see that happening. In some lower intensity vestibular input, so we might see that more for our kids who are a little bit more fight or flight or a little bit more anxious, and that's going to be that linear movement. Everything needs to be kind of predictable so they know what to expect. And then that proprioceptive input is going to be super important also. Those heavy work opportunities are going to be so beneficial for our kids to get reorganized and get that input into their muscles and joints so that they can be alert and they can focus on the necessary academic expectations that are being put on them. Don't worry, I'm going to give you ideas later. So again, I just touched on, we really need to be promoting these sensory breaks if we want to have successful learners. Whether we're doing virtual or we're doing in person, it's really important to know every kid is different. So your kids' needs are going to be different based on how they interpret information. So here I have some appropriate sensory breaks for children that kind of avoid sensory opportunities. So you might want to incorporate in your home or learning environment like a cuddle corner. So you take all the pillows off the couch and put them in the corner, and that's kind of their safe space where they can decompress during their break time if available. That's actually going to be super important too. Any of those deep pressure opportunities are actually going to release neurochemicals in your brain that are going to calm you down. So if your child's feeling overwhelmed or frustrated and they're having a day, something where they can really get that feedback is going to be really important. Calming music in the background, whether they want to take it during their break time and listen to it on headphones, or you want to play it low in the background if it's not too distracting. Visual sensory toys, and again, those rhythmic movement patterns. So whether they're taking a break outside on the swing and they're swinging themselves back and forth, or they're even just, rocking back and forth in their desk chair. And then for those seekers who are fidgeting on their screens and they can't seem to sit still, taking jumping breaks or doing animal walks. I've done crazy things with paper plates. You put them on your feet, you slide around the rug. It's super fun. Quick freeze dance opportunities. Time outdoors is going to be so critical. Obviously, we're leading into the fall and soon to be winter, so taking advantage of those opportunities now while we have them will be so important. Engaging in sensory bins, and again, those inversion and unpredictable movements if possible. So I'm going to skip over this slide because I kind of already talked about this, and I'm going to touch on it in my next slide. So optimal seating, we talked about being flexible in your seating, but what I've noticed is a lot of children, it's different day to day what they need, right? So having that flexibility is super important, and understanding that if a kid isn't necessarily sitting down, it's not because they're not focused or not wanting to engage, it's just because they need something different to stay focused. So like we talked about before, maybe your child needs to lie on their stomach. Maybe your child needs to sit on that yoga ball. But another really good opportunity that I've noticed a lot of my kids benefit from is putting their work up on a vertical surface. So whether it's on the wall or even like up against just a solid surface is fine, but they're getting a lot more feedback that way, and it just makes it a lot easier for them to focus. And honestly, it's a novelty. When does your kid ever have that opportunity? So taping their work up onto the wall and having, obviously not writing on the walls, but writing on the paper, not only is it a novel opportunity, but they're getting that feedback against gravity. So they're getting that input to their muscles and joints, and they're standing up typically, or they can sit on the ball and write on the wall. There's just a lot of options that are super important. But another thing that's really important to know also is your child's feet should always be positioned on the floor. So if your child is sitting in a chair and their feet are dangling back and forth, that's typically not going to be good for their posture, therefore it's not going to be great for their attention. So whether you need to put a phone book or pillow under their feet, couple books under their feet, if they don't have an opportunity to sit in a smaller chair, if they're sitting in the dining room chair, that's super important. Or if you feel like maybe putting a pillow under their bottom will give them a little bit more flexibility in their seating. If you don't have a yoga ball, that's another one that a lot of my families have incorporated into their routines, and they've said it has really helped them a lot because they're getting a little bit of movement and it's helping them to stay engaged while they're doing their work. So that's been super helpful. And let me see. Oh, another thing is just like I touched on earlier, is trying to position them away from where there's a lot of foot traffic in the house if possible. And if it's not, like I said, turning them so that they might be in the background, but they're not having to look at everybody walking by, siblings, dog, grandparents, whoever's coming in the door. It's super distracting. So if possible, turning them away from where there's a lot of foot traffic, doors, windows, etc. Okay, I'm going to talk about strategies that have worked for me. So like I said, I did telehealth for about 14 to 15 weeks, and I have had my fair share of hits and misses. I work in an outpatient facility currently, but I did work at an autism clinic previously, and I do early intervention also. So I'm used to being in homes with parents, and therefore I'm able to really see what's going on. And I do feel that telehealth has given me that opportunity to get in the home again and see what they have, what they're currently utilizing. So this is awesome. So here are some strategies that have worked for me. Like I said before, writing on a vertical surface has been super beneficial to all of my kids, whether they're elementary age, middle school age, and high school age. Tactile and messy play breaks. So whether you're using sensory bins or you're trying to teach your child how to learn their letters or learn their numbers, engaging in that tactile messy play seems to be super, kids are like, "Ooh, I'm not supposed to be doing this." So it increases their motivation and they get that feedback. Jumping and standing on pillows. So I've used couch cushions and couch pillows like crazy over the last couple of weeks. Typically, even if you don't have those, you can use bed pillows. Jumping on them gives them a little bit more feedback, and it's honestly a novelty still as well. Contained play spaces are awesome. So if you have a child that's really having a hard time sitting still, giving them kind of an opportunity to sit in a certain space, even during their break time, so they know where their bodies need to be, has been helpful. So whether you're using a laundry basket, a plastic storage container, and if they're small enough, you can even give them movement opportunities within that contained play space, so that they have the best of both worlds. They know where their body needs to be, and they're getting the movement opportunities that they need. Pillowcase races or exercises in the pillowcases. So that kind of gives them that resistance, right? And if they could take their pillowcase right off their bed, right off their pillows, and they can do like snow angels on the floor in their pillowcase, they can jump in it, they can spin around in it. Animal walks, like I said, paper plates have been my best friend. Cup stacking, plastic cups are like huge. And these are everyday household items that I'm thinking, if instead of a recess opportunity, or if your child's not really getting they need those intermittent brain breaks, or like Sandy had said earlier, they might need more break opportunities than work opportunities to get them started. Cup stacking and then knocking them over with their body, log rolling. Writing with chalk, using window markers, rolling them up in a tight blanket, and moving games. So I've really found it beneficial even to use a dice from a board game like Candyland or any of those games, even spinners. And you can say, okay, if you land on purple, you're going to do 5 jumping jacks. If you land on red, you're going to do, and then it becomes kind of a game for them where they're waiting to see what they get, they're completing their activity, and then they're spinning again, and giving them a designated amount of times where they get to do that. And then they have to go back to their work. So these strategies that I'm going to talk about next are for our older not our older learners, but not so much our younger elementary age learners, those children that kind of need or want a little bit more control over the situation. And that's been a huge battle between teacher and child, or parent and child. So what I've been noticing is I've been doing like these check-in opportunities. So whether it's the teacher or the parent, obviously if this is feasible, they get a certain amount of check-ins with the child. So you either cash in a pom-pom or you cash in a cotton ball, and then you're allowed to check. Are they completing their work? Are they staying on task? Are they just flipping through the videos and then logging off? Which is sometimes the case. So having those intermittent opportunities where the child has a little bit of control over the situation, but then again, the parent or teacher is able to step in and correct as needed. Clipboards, clothespin boards, and check off to-do lists like we talked about before. Even if you have a list of things and your child's moving the clip down or checking it off, that is such an intrinsic motivator. I mean, even for us as adults, when we know we're getting stuff done, we're more motivated to continue. So weighted backpacks, lap pads, Lycra bed sheets, so that's more like a spandexy material, and tighter clothing, that's going to give us that feedback. So obviously a lot of people don't have those materials, but a lot of people do have backpacks or do have tote bags, and you could put books, stuffed animals, all those things inside the backpack, and as the child's getting ready for their day, you can have them wearing that. So they're getting the feedback, they're getting organized in their body and brain, and then they're going to get ready to engage. If your child's a little bit more on the independent side, but you still are needing to intervene, I've noticed color coding has helped. It's just a lot more visually appealing, and it helps children know where they need to go or what they need to do without as many cues. Obviously taking a break card, so whether that's a Post-it, an index card, and they need to cash that in, I need to take a break, taking that self-advocacy of knowing what their body needs. Obviously our younger learners might have a more hard time with that, but our older learners have a much easier time knowing what they need, and even introducing that topic to our younger learners so that they can learn what that looks like. Oh, it looks like you need a break, taking it and affording them the opportunity to take a brain break. Incorporating virtual experiences into the daily routine. So I put a resource at the end, and it's through like a local museum. They do virtual experiences and like field trips. So they do museums and they do all those types of things. So kind of keeping them engaged and keeping them learning, but through a novel opportunity. And this last idea is one of my best. All my families are using it currently. I call it the fishbowl. So you take a big bucket or a bowl or a pail from the beach, it doesn't really matter, whatever, and you put a whole bunch of ideas in it, and you fold the papers. And then whenever they need a break, they get to pick one or two things out of the bin, and then they get to do whatever that activity is. I found it's been a lot more motivating and a lot more like, oh, we have one more, and then you get to pick an idea from the bin, and then we do it. And it's just been so motivating too for parents and teachers to come up with ideas together, brainstorm. It keeps it new and exciting because not everyone wants to do animal walks all the time. So coming up with new ideas and, allowing kids to kind of have a say, like when you have a break, what did you want to write something on here? And maybe when we'll pick it out of the box. So keeping them on their toes and keeping them excited, and excited to utilize that opportunity to get the input they need to hopefully be able to regroup and go back to that learning opportunity that they were just taking a break from. So I have some resources here, and then at the bottom, like underneath, I just put what they were, just so that you're not clicking all of the links, but I do have some handouts of some visual schedules and brain break cards, sensory strategies for teachers and parents. That was a really good PDF I found beneficial. A lot of my parents, I gave to them, and they found it helpful. Sensory tools to increase children's focus in the classroom environment specifically. So teachers, that one might be really good for you to check out and just see. Obviously, you're not going to be able to do everything. Setting those reasonable expectations, but maybe picking one or two things to incorporate and seeing what kids benefit from what. I do have social stories on there for kids returning to school and doing virtual learning. And then again, like I said, the interactive learning ideas on there as well. So feel free to use those resources as you see beneficial. But I've seen a lot of transition from the beginning of this experience to now. And I know, I can only imagine for teachers and parents how they must feel, but we're all along for the ride with you guys. And we're always willing to help in any way that we can. So utilize your OTs because we're always willing to help. Okay, that's all I got.
That's great. Thank you. All right. Well, thank you so much. Well, our goal tonight was to have, different perspectives at looking at this one topic. And I think we've definitely accomplished that, which was really great. I like to see a little bit of the crossover in some of the information that you had, but there were really some really unique ideas that I really appreciate. So everyone that's watching, again, if you have questions, you can put them in the chat box and I will definitely ask our panelists. I do have some questions to kick us off here. So let's start with Sandy. I think this question would be best for you. So you said in your presentation to not give up the first time and that sometimes it does take multiple trials for something to work. When would you know that it's not going to work, or if repeating it might do even more harm than good?
I think that's a good question. I would say I would repeat at least 5 or 6 times, and over various kinds of settings. So try that same thing in various settings. But if reintroducing, or even the first time you're introducing, I also think it's really important for parents to not be strong arming kids into doing certain things. So if the presentation of something upsets the child or just becomes a really negative situation, then that's probably the time to cut your losses and just let it go. Because once a negative association has been made, it is very, very hard to undo. So that would be, yeah, if it really seems like the child is having a very strong negative reaction, that would be when I would stop.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay. Okay, let's see. Okay, how about this one first, Sam? I have more than one child participating in virtual learning. That sounds familiar. How can I arrange for privacy and reduce distractions in a shared space?
I imagine this is going to be a situation many families find themselves in. And so some tips that I can give you, if they're sharing a space, is to get creative with furniture placement. So if you have a bookshelf that you can turn to separate their spaces, if you have dressers that can be turned, if they're in the bedroom, so getting creative with that furniture in the space that they're in, just to kind of create some dividers for them. Also, those trifold boards, we're going to go back to that if you can. That will kind of help cut out that visual of the whole room. Instead of putting a desk or a table up against a wall, think about turning it around so that their back is to the wall, and so that you can maybe avoid other people walking behind them and trying to move through the space. If you have multiple people in one space and people need to get up and move, and parents are working at the same time, so maybe eliminating some of that, movement behind them, is to think about kind of turning things around so that their back is to a wall. The setup that I have behind me is actually a rolling garment cart with just some fabric draped over it. So maybe thinking along the lines of that for privacy, hanging curtains or a shower curtain from the ceiling, just thinking about creative ways to kind of separate those spaces. Also, the use of headphones to kind of cut out that background noise if it's possible. You don't always have to use headphones. You can think about using the earbuds with the microphone built in. If that's not feasible, finding just a quiet corner where you can have, your volume turned down, but trying to separate them as far as possible within that space that you're working in.
Great. Kelly, what are some examples of creative ways that parents can help keep their child on task during that virtual school day?
So I think this is probably everybody, right? Because it's really hard to keep a child's attention in general, let alone on a computer. So what I can say is, if possible, limiting screen time other than virtual learning opportunities is going to be so huge. Their brains are already so overstimulated from being on the computer for however long a day their school day is. So limiting that excessive extra screen time, if possible, is going to be tremendous. Increasing outdoor opportunities, as well as incorporating as many movement breaks and sensory breaks as you can to increase that attention, and then kind of utilizing those visual timers and visual schedules that we talked about, whether it's you're working for 10 minutes and then you get 10 minutes of a break, whether it's a sand timer, a timer on the phone, something that's going to give them that reinforcement that they need and kind of a little bit of independence, right? When that goes off or when the timer runs out, you're back to work, and then vice versa. When it goes off, you get your break. That way the kid or child can also get that independence from it if possible.
Great, great. All right, Sandy, back to you. How do you help set up a space and turn it into a learning space if I don't have a lot of room to create that, right? This is, again, I think a big problem for a lot of people. Not all of us have separate offices for each of our children, right? And how do we help transition from playtime to learning time if that's going to be the same space?
Yeah. I think that the best thing to do is go back to some of the ideas that have been given in terms of having a visual or having a really clear demarcation. So it can be something as simple as, you know, you have a piece of colored cloth that covers the table when it's learning time. And every time you go to the table to learn rather than to eat breakfast or to whatever, you cover the table with that colored cloth, and then that color begins to trigger in the child's brain, oh, this is learning time. Another example that I think kind of goes back to an idea that I think Kelly and Sam both mentioned this. If the child is not super distracted by music in the background, having a musical cue that when this and play the same music every day. So that same music gets played, it begins to trigger the brain. As just a person who listens to the radio when you're driving, how many of us, we hear a song and we remember where we were the last time we heard that song because it creates those memories in our brains. So just finding ways that even though you might need to use the same space, having almost like a trigger that then associates, oh, it's time to learn for the child.
All right, next question. And I'm going to let you all decide. This one's in our chat box, who might have a good answer here. So suggestion for a 12-year-old to maintain focus on virtual learning. If I'm not actively looking at a screen, he is changing it to YouTube. He seems to be overwhelmed. I have a lot going on, 3 at home on virtual learning, 1's 3 high needs. Again, I think this is a huge problem. Kids are tech savvy. They know how to get to what they want to be on. So who has an answer for that one?
I think I'll answer, and then if you guys have something to supplement, feel free.
Sounds great, Kelly. Thanks.
I have a 12-year-old on my caseload who there's a very similar situation. Mom has incorporated one of those like check-in systems. They're using Legos or Minecraft pieces, whatever he's into. So he picks the 5 and she checks in with him every 10 minutes or something. And then they built it up. Now they're way more. The check-in times are more spread out. But initially it might have been 5 to 10 minutes. She would hand him a Minecraft or Lego piece and check what he was doing, check his web browser, see what work was completed, leave him be. Vice versa, same thing, until obviously he understood the accountability of it and that she was going to be coming to check in. Obviously, she has other kids as well that she's kind of having to juggle too at the same time. So initially it was kind of tough building up to it, but now they're at that opportunity where she's checking in every 30 minutes to an hour. So it's really helped that family a lot. So if that's something that he has some interest, if he's interested in Legos, Minecraft, I know that's like big for the 12-year-old boys now, but finding something that he's interested in, kind of having that check-in system has been super helpful.
Makes sense. Sandy, Sam, anything to add to that?
I would have said something very similar to you, Kelly. Definitely incorporating their interest, their high interest, tying that into their work. So you want this and I want this, and so let's use that to our advantage. You get to earn this when you do this. So, I think it ties right into what you said, Kelly. So I'm right on board with that.
Yeah, I would have said something very similar. I think especially at 12, it's really important to get the buy-in. You know, they're at that age at 12 that they want control and they want to be in control of things. So really having the buy-in of, you know, maybe talking with your son about, you know, what is motivating for him, and not just assuming, because sometimes I think we fall into the trap of assuming we know what will motivate our kids, but really including him in the process of, you know, picking what will motivate him, and then using, you know, the ideas that both Kelly and Sam said, I think will be really important.
And if I could add one more thing, sorry, Kelly.
Go ahead, go ahead.
I know you had mentioned that you maybe think he might be overwhelmed. So in thinking about that, I would maybe talk with him and see if you could come up with some things that might help in that area if he is feeling overwhelmed by having his camera on the whole time. Maybe communicate with the teacher and say, you know, he's a little overwhelmed with seeing himself the whole time, seeing all of the other kids in the classroom. It's a lot to take in. So he's a little overwhelmed by that. Maybe we can designate, okay, for this part of the lesson, you can turn your camera off, but keep your audio on. And that might take a little bit of the pressure off that he might be feeling and being overwhelmed by just the visual stimulus of the classroom environment that way.
I was going to add one more thing too. If you talk with your son and ask him how, like, take a look at his day, however, I'm not sure how your school's doing it, but if they put out a list of, I don't know, 8 things that he needs to do, talk with him and say, how many things do you think, or pick 2 or 3 things on here that you think you can accomplish, and then take a break, and then do whatever you're motivated to do, whether that's watch a YouTube video or play with his siblings, but having that discussion and, you know, taking a look at the list, and then he can even make his own little list. You can put a paper in like a little binder sheet, and he can cross it off with a dry erase, cross it off, and then, oh, all 3 of my things are done. I can take a break, and then having that same discussion when he returns. Maybe his attention's increased. He can do 4 things before he loses focus, or maybe he's like, oh, nope, I think I can only do 2, and then I'm going to need another break. And then working from there, I think that would be helpful as well.
Yeah, it sounds like overall, I think that flexibility for everyone, teachers, families, kids, like we're all trying to figure this out. Absolutely. Okay, so here's another question. I love all of these ideas. The only thing is I won't be home to make any of them work. I work 8 to 5:30. What are my options to have my 8-year-old daughter to get more out of the online school situation since she will be in daycare all day? That's a tough one, and I think, again, I think really relevant. Any thoughts?
Oh, go ahead, Sandy.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay, so that is super tricky. I don't have kids of my own, so I know it probably sounds a little silly coming from someone who doesn't, but I'm with kids all day long. And I have a lot of parents who have the same situation. I would say, if possible, trying to make the most out of the opportunities that you have with your daughter prior to going to school. So coming from a sensory perspective, making sure that when she does arrive at school or at daycare, wherever she's going, that she's as organized as she can be and ready to learn, to take advantage of those learning opportunities. So whether she's wheelbarrow walking to go put clothes on really fast, and they don't have to take up a lot of your time, because I'm sure in the morning it's taking a long time. She's jumping to the car, you put a little couple extra things in her backpack, she puts it on, she goes to the car, and then if she's in the car and she's overwhelmed, putting some, like, if she's a stuffed animals or stuff that can kind of like weigh her down a little on her lap, a blanket, snuggle her in, optimize that arousal level as best as you can, so that you know when you're dropping her off, you did your little routine in the morning, and she's as ready as she can be to take in as much information as she can.
Yeah, I love that idea, Kelly. I was also going to say, and I think that I also have a lot of parents that are in this situation of needing to use daycare during the day. And unfortunately, and I'm not sure what your situation is, the person who had this question, whether the daycare is actually assisting with the online learning or not, because I know some daycares are not, and that is even more a stressor for the parents if they know that the child isn't getting any kind of education during the day. What I would really stress, if that is your situation, that they're not doing learning during the day, is it really is the same as what Kelly said, but just make the best of the time you have. Frankly, most people who now what we're doing right now is not homeschooling, but people who do actually homeschool, they're really only homeschooling for an hour or two a day. They're not doing 6 or 7 hours of homeschooling. So think of your time with your daughter and the time that you're spending doing schooling really about quality over quantity. It's really more about engaging her and engaging her really strongly, and she's really on target for 45 minutes is way more valuable than 4 hours of she keeps fading in and out of her attention or whatever, especially when you're going to be tired and stressed after work. So you don't want to put yourself in a situation where you're getting frustrated either. So just be really kind to yourself and be really kind to your kids. And just know that you're all doing the best you can, and that's okay. You're doing what your daughter needs, and that's going to be good enough.
To piggyback,
Go ahead, Sam.
To kind of piggyback off of what Sandy said, my advice from a teacher's perspective and also a parent perspective, set limits. Set limits for yourself and for your children. Less is more at that point. If there's not any schooling going on at daycare and it's all left to be done in the evening during your family time, your one-on-one time, set limits and stick to it. Whatever you get done in that amount of time, that's it. Close the book, put the computer away, and take the rest of that time to spend that quality time together. Do what's best for your child.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think Sandy's saying, be kind to yourself and set limits. It's just so important. I mean, no one expected to be in this situation. No parent expected to be, having their child at home to educate them. And, we still have to work and, and survive. So I think that message of being kind to yourself, I think communication is key to me. Communicating both, the parent to the teacher and the teacher to the parents, letting them know what's going on. I mean, I love that, it's cheesy, but we're all in this together. And I think the only way we can be in it together is by letting others know, what's happening and not passing judgment on, anyone for the situation that they're in, because I truly believe everyone's doing the best that they can with what they have. So that's really important. All right, on that note, I think that would be the end of our questions that we have for now. I am going to share my screen one more time because I just want to put up the contact information, both for the Autism Center at Misericordia. That's my name, my email address, our Facebook page. I'll get this name right this time because it's right there in front of me, the Hazelton Autism Family Support Hub, again with Sandy's information there. I also put we have a group, the Autism Educators Support Alliance. That is for educators, obviously. We're trying to, as we're trying to help families, we're also working to help educators. We know that team is very important, and we want to make sure that everyone is getting, the information that they need to make, this school year as successful as possible. I'd like to thank Sam, Kelly, and Sandy, of course, for being here and sharing all of your wisdom. I know that I will use a lot of your tips and tricks for my own children. The trifold board, I love that idea. It seems so simple, but it sounds like it's genius. And, you know, if after everyone, you know, goes home tonight and watches this overview, have any additional questions, please contact Sandy and I. We don't claim to have all the answers. What we claim to have is access to a lot of people who have a lot of answers. So the answers that we don't have, we will work just as hard as we can to find those answers for you. And that is the end for us.
Kristen, I
Anything
want
else?
to,
Yeah,
I
please.
want to add something. For those of you who, if you are a teacher or an educator, or if you are a parent, because I think that our next, I just want to talk a little bit about the webinars that we have coming up.
Yes, please.
So we do have a webinar or a discussion group every day this month, or every Wednesday this month, not every day, that would be a lot. Every Wednesday at 6 o'clock. So our next one coming up next week is kind of taking a lot of the things we talked about tonight, but flipping it to coming from the educator's perspective. I do think even if you are a parent and not an educator, it may be really valuable for you, because you, as we just mentioned, you're all in this together, you're a team. So you may find yourself as a parent being in the situation of needing to give your teacher some hints of how to engage your child. So it, I think, would be really helpful for parents as well. And it will be a panel from different perspectives, just like this one. And then the next 2 Wednesdays after that, the 16th and the 23rd, are actually a discussion group for educators. So if you are an educator, and by that we mean anyone who provides any kind of education or support services to students in a school setting. So that could be teachers, that could be paraprofessionals, it could be OT, speech, PT, even behavioral support. Those are discussion groups, and they will be, those will not be recorded, so there will be privacy for you to be able to discuss those things amongst other professionals. The webinars tonight as well as next week will be recorded and on our Facebook page. And I actually think, Kristen, we can probably send out to, because when you all registered, you would have provided your email. And so I think we'll try and send out the links to the webinar as well. And then I really want to talk about the last webinar we have this month. I am super excited about. We are going to have a guest speaker. His name is Chris Bonello, and he runs a website called Autistic Not Weird. And he is a professional advocate and educator. He actually is from in the UK, but he is autistic and was a primary teacher, and now does tutoring and advocacy work. So he's going to be presenting for us, talking about distance learning and teaching, but from the perspective of an autistic individual, which I think is a really important thing, because we're never going to know we take our best guesses and try to support our kids as best as possible, but really having the perspective of someone with autism who can really give us some insider knowledge, I think, is important. So we hope you'll join us for the rest of the webinars this month too.
Absolutely. Thank you, Sandy, for sharing all of that. All right, so with that, I'm going to stop our recording here.